The classic French cake called the Fraisier. I think this was probably my favorite or most exciting cake, I should say, as a young culinary student way back when we learned how to make this stunning cake that is also so delicious. It was just really exciting to realize that, wow, I could totally do this. I could totally make beautiful classic cakes just by learning the basics. So I'm going to show you guys how to make this cake today. The Fraisier is basically means strawberry in French. Here we go again with the foreign words and the pronunciations. So I'm mostly Spanish in my foreign language training. So for me, I would say fresas, and I'm not real sure how they say strawberries in French, even though it's spelled the same way. So basically this cake is made up of a few different components. First of all, the vanilla sponge cake, which is what I'm making right now. And once again, this is my famous yellow cake recipe that I used in my most recent video for the Dobos tort. If you haven't seen that one yet, you're definitely going to want to check that out. So this is the same base cake recipe that I'm using because I love it. It is so versatile, and it's going to be really great in a cake like the Fraisier. I use all-purpose and cake flour, a combination of the two. It really does help with the sturdiness of this kind of a cake by using all-purpose flour in a cake recipe. It's going to give you a little bit more of a pound cake texture, which for me is a good thing because we want this cake to be really sturdy. I use a combination of oil, a neutral oil, and melted vegan butter. And as you saw, I added the vinegar to my soy milk because that is the only milk that will thicken up like a mock buttermilk. Not only do I love this recipe, but it is the easiest recipe to mix. As you see, you don't need any mixers. It's a straight up liquid into dry ingredient recipe. You really just have to mix it by hand in a large bowl with a whisk. So another thing about using these two flours together, all-purpose flour is a higher in protein flour, and so that's going to absorb more liquids in the recipe than a cake flour would, which basically is what gives it that more dense structure like I talked about. It's more of a pound cake structure. And not really even pound cake. It's more closer to the genoise. It is going to absorb more of that liquid by using the all-purpose flour, which lends to a slightly drier cake, which is what we're after in a recipe like this one. Now, the thing about making a Fraisier cake is that it is a molded cake in that we are going to be making up a pastry cream that is then going to have whipped cream folded into it. So we do need a ring mold to do that. And I have a couple of different sizes. These are expensive, but if you have a springform pan, that's going to work exactly the same, and you don't have to spend all this money on getting a ring mold. And yes, I know you guys know me. I never use springform pans, not for cheesecakes, but I do love them for molded desserts because if you take out the bottom, you have yourself a really cheap and affordable ring mold. So now I could go ahead and bake my cake batter right in here. However, I'm not going to do that. I want to bake all of my cake batter into this half sheet pan. And the reason I want to do that is because, as you know, when cakes bake and then they cool, they sort of shrink away from the sides. Even if it's just a 1/4 inch, that's too much. I want to be able to bake the batter all into this sheet pan, and then after it's baked and cooled, I'm going to go ahead and cut out the cake circles that I need to build this cake. So what exactly is the Fraisier cake, other than the word Fraisier, meaning strawberry in French? It's a sponge cake, obviously. We've got that in the oven. The filling is going to be, as I mentioned, a Diplomat cream. Now, what is a Diplomat cream? That is pastry cream that is fortified with agar, because we do need an extra thickener once we fold in that whipped cream. So Diplomat cream is essentially pastry cream that is mixed with whipped cream to lighten it up. But as you see right now, I'm sort of lining up all of my strawberries here. And why am I doing that? Not because I like playing with strawberries, but because if you've ever seen the finished Fraisier cake, you'll know that the whole outside rim of it has the beautifully sliced strawberries. And then we're going to chop up a bunch more, and that's going to go in the filling. Now, typically, I should say classically, the Fraisier cake has a layer of marzipan as the top. Now, I have been having an unbelievable time finding almond paste here, among other ingredients that I'm sure like me, you guys are having a tough time finding some of these ingredients. So we're going to forego the marzipan layer for the top of this cake. You've probably seen it done a lot of different ways. People sometimes do the marzipan. I've seen an extra layer of whipped cream go on the top. I've seen it very simply, just some powdered sugar. So I'm probably going to do a thin layer of whipped cream. I've also seen it done with a strawberry jelly layer on top. So there's really a lot of different ways that you can do it. But I'm going to probably do the whipped cream layer and maybe some sliced strawberries on top as well. So now that I have all my little same size strawberries lined up, that's going to be for the rim. I'm sure I have more than enough. I'm going to get to chopping the strawberries for the center filling. And that's just going to be cubing these little strawberries into bite-sized pieces. Some people would like to take these strawberry pieces and macerate them in some sugar. I'm not going to do that because this is basically like almost like a mousse. I mean, obviously it's not a mousse, but if you can understand what the consistency of this filling is going to be like, I really don't want soupy strawberries mixing in with a delicate cream filling like that. It's just going to create too much moisture bleeding from the strawberries. And when we cut this cake, we just don't want it to be a literal mess. So I'm keeping my strawberries just freshly raw like this. I'm not adding anything to it. I did make a simple syrup, which is exactly just equal parts sugar and water. And that is cooked on the stove already. And I'm also going to add some of these little strawberry pieces. I have so many strawberries. I went and bought 2 pounds of them, and they look really beautiful for this time of year. I'm so surprised. But I'm going to add a few of the strawberries to the simple syrup, so I have like a strawberry syrup that I'm going to brush on the layers of the sponge cake when we assemble this cake. So there are quite a few steps to making this. Obviously, it's the sponge cake. It's a strawberry simple syrup. I'm cutting all of my strawberries as a filling for the cake. Not to mention, we have to make the pastry cream, the whipped cream to make the Diplomat cream, which is the filling. And what else? I guess that's really it. So what is that? 4 recipes. The vanilla cake part of this and the simple syrup part of this can be made in advance. So if you didn't want to tackle this whole cake project in one day, you could work ahead and make your vanilla cake the day before. Just wrap it well and leave it in the refrigerator until you're ready to use it. The simple syrup, actually, we used to make gallons of it and just leave it in the refrigerator for whenever we needed to use it. I typically don't use simple syrup on my vegan cakes because vegan cakes by nature are more moist than our non-vegan counterpart. So you don't really want to soak a vegan cake that's already super moist with more liquid, because then you're going to border on a gummy cake, and that's the last thing we want when we're eating cake. So this should be enough. This is probably about 1.5 cups of chopped up strawberries. That's going to be perfect for the filling for this cake. So I'm just going to set that aside. And next I have to trim off the tops of my strawberries that are going to be for the outside rim of the cake. Again, when you're trimming, you want to make sure that they're going to stay the same height as much as possible. And then you're just going to cut these in half. And this is going to line the outer rim of our cake and just be so beautiful. If you've ever seen a finished Fraisier cake, you know they're just really beautiful cakes and so delicious. Wait until you taste this cream and sponge cake and strawberries all together. You are going to love this cake. So the cake is finished baking. This sheet cake took exactly 20 minutes at 350 degrees. It's perfectly baked. So I've gone ahead and set up my springform pan, just the ring portion of it with no bottom. And you're definitely going to need an acetate cake strip to go on the inside. I don't often tell you guys you have to buy things, but this is something that if you're going to get into classically cold preparation cakes and desserts, you are going to need to invest in some of these acetate cake strips. But first, what I want to do is go ahead and cut out my cake circles. Now I'm going to make sure that with this size cake ring, I'm going to have enough cake. So I think I'm going to have to go diagonal, cut one ring right over here, and then one ring right over there is actually pretty perfect. Now, with this method of doing it, I am going to have some cake waste, but in my opinion, it's never waste. I always save all of my cake scraps and use them for a later project. So go ahead and cut out your cake circles. Now, if this is too much waste for you and you really don't want to have this excess cake laying around or in your freezer for garnishes for later, you can, alternatively, you could just bake this batter into a 10-inch cake pan and then trim just a little bit of it. But I decided to go this way because I just really love having excess cake straps in my freezer. So for the other strawberries, I'm going to put them into my simple syrup that I already made up. Again, simple syrup is just simple sugar and water in equal parts. You bring it up to a boil and you let it boil for about 3 minutes. That evaporates off some of the liquid and creates like a very delicate syrup. And that's going to be the soaking for our cakes. Now, I've added maybe about 5 or 6 strawberries into there. I'm going to simmer that down so the strawberries start to break down. Then I'm going to puree the whole thing, and then that is going to be the strawberry simple syrup for my cake. So now that I've trimmed up my sponge cakes, I am going to be doing this part ahead of time, and you might think, well, why wouldn't you just do this part while you're assembling the cake? We're making a custard with agar. Once we fold in the whipped cream and add the agar to it, it's going to start to set really quickly, and so you do have to pour it into the cake ring pretty fast so that it doesn't set before you get it in there. And if we have to take this extra little bit of time to brush the strawberry syrup onto our cake, we just sort of run the risk of our Diplomat cream setting before we even get it into the ring mold. So I'm just working ahead of time. I'm going to pop these into the refrigerator while the custard is being prepared, and then it's literally minutes to assemble this cake. Now, one other thing that we have to do before we start the Diplomat cream recipe, which is the last recipe for this cake, is we have to line our strawberries on the inside of the ring mold. My sponge cake I've already placed inside, soaked with the strawberry syrup. And so you just want to make sure that you have all of your components prepared ahead of time, because once we start that custard, it is go time, and you're going to have to work fairly quickly because agar does tend to set a little bit quicker than gelatin from our past lives. All right, so we can start our custard recipe only when all the other components have been prepared. And I apologize in advance for any of that loud, like, I don't know what that is. It's like this, some electric noise. I'm hearing it. It's from this induction cooktop that I bought specifically to do these recipes, but it's kind of loud and annoying. So anyway, this is my plant milk that I have in a large sauce pot on the stove. I am using soy milk, but you can really use any plant milk that you like the best. I've added a vanilla bean pod to that, but you can use vanilla extract if you don't have the vanilla bean pod. This is my sugar and cornstarch that I'm whisking together. If you've ever made a stovetop custard and had lumps in it, it's probably because your cornstarch wasn't distributed throughout the sugar. Now I'm also adding some agar to that. I think, as I mentioned earlier, agar is going to be an additional sort of strengthener to this recipe, so that when we cut the cake, it's not just like this soft, soupy mess that just falls apart. The agar is really going to help the structure of this cake. So we'll go ahead and add that right to the plant milk. And at this point, we're going to have to make sure that we stir constantly, because this is going to cook pretty quickly, and you don't want to get any of, you don't want to burn the bottom. So you want to keep it moving all the time. Really try to get into the corners of the bowl and make sure you're scraping the bottom. And we're just going to bring this up to a boil. Once it boils, we're going to add the vegan butter, and then transfer it to a larger mixing bowl so that we can fold in the vegan whipped cream. And then we are done. So I've strained this right into a large mixing bowl. It is still piping hot, and I'm going to add the vegan butter and just give that a good stir. I do have my vegan whipped cream whipped up ahead of time, because that needs to be ready when this custard is ready. We obviously can't fold it in until this is really cooled. Otherwise, it's just going to melt your whipped cream and you're going to have Diplomat soup. So what I like to do is really just kind of let it sit here at room temperature. It's cooling. You could see how piping hot this is. I keep giving it a stir just to really help release a lot of that excess heat. You could see though how beautifully silky and smooth this cream is. Diplomat cream is probably more popularly known in the dessert called Napoleon, which is also what we're going to be making here in my new series for Classic Cakes Veganized. So if you're not already subscribed, I hope that you will. This is the second cake in my series. Last week we did the classic Hungarian doboz tort. Before I started this series though, I have already done the classic Black Forest cake as well as the opera cake. So be sure to check out my website so you can find all the recipes. Everything has a step-by-step video tutorial. So yeah, we are well on our way into this new series called Classic Cakes Veganized. I'm having so much fun with it, you guys. I hope that you are too. So let's take a little break. I will continue to stir this down so it gets cooled. It's going to take a little while and I don't want to rush it. So I'm going to just continue stirring this down until it gets super cool. And then we're going to fold in that vegan whipped cream. So this has been like, I don't know, maybe 5 or 7 minutes, and it is getting cooler. It is still quite hot, but you can see that the agar is really working, and you know, the thickening from the cornstarch in the custard is working. So we just have to really keep stirring it so it doesn't set while it's in this bowl, and get it to the right temperature so that we can fold in the whipped cream. What is the right temperature? It's probably going to be close to your body temperature. So, you know, like 100 degrees is still a little bit hot when you're talking about adding whipped cream into this. I'm going to say on the cooler side of body temperature, so maybe like about 95 degrees. So I do have my vegan whipped cream done up ahead of time. It's been waiting in the refrigerator, and I do have several recipes on my blog for you to follow. One is a straight up homemade recipe. Another option is explaining how you can just skim the fat off of the top of the can of refrigerated coconut milk, and that makes a perfect vegan whipped cream. However, I know a lot of people have trouble because just every brand is different, and I am not sponsored by A Taste of Thai, but I will tell you that I do have the best luck with this brand as far as the ratio of fat on the top to the liquid in the bottom of the can. So that's an option. Another option is to use Silk brand heavy whipping cream, which is an absolute dream come true. I rely on that a lot now. It's just so much easier if you can get your hands on that. I really do recommend it. All right, how are we doing here? So what I am going to do is take just a portion of that whipped cream and put it in to lighten this up, and that's going to cool it down pretty quickly too. Okay, that looks good. That didn't melt. There's not like liquid pooling on the top. So I am sure that I am good to go to fold in the rest of it. Next goes our chopped strawberries. Another portion of cream goes on top of that. And just spread it around to the edges. Now this is probably the hardest part, is getting this last layer of cake snugly fit into the ring mold, but that's it. It is perfectly to the top. Our custard is going to set in there. I'm going to go ahead and pop this into the refrigerator for a few hours. I want to make sure that the agar is doing its work. The whole thing is set before we unmold this and finish this cake. So let's take a little coffee break. All right, let's take a look. I may be rushing this because I'm excited and I have no patience. This has been about 3 hours in the refrigerator, and look how beautiful the Fraisier cake is, you guys. It looks great. I know it tastes great because I've already tasted the cream with the sponge cake, with the syrup, like everything is amazing. So I'm just a little bit nervous that maybe it's not set and I won't be able to cut it just yet, which would be a nightmare for trying to take pictures of this cake, but I'm gonna go for it. I'm a risk taker. So the only thing that I'm second guessing is my decision to make the cake into the sheet and then cut it. I'm thinking that it might have been a better idea to just bake it in a 10-inch pan, let it shrink up on its own, and then fit it into the pan that way, because it was a bit of a rough cut when I did, you know, cut out the circles. And you know, maybe part of the reason why they put the marzipan top on was to cover up the ugliness of the raw sponge cake. But I'm gonna go ahead and just do the powdered sugar top, which I think is a really pretty finish to this cake. It's not going to make it overly sweet because the custard filling is really subtly sweet. The cake itself doesn't have a lot of sugar in it, so the fact that I'm putting powdered sugar on the top for the icing, if you will, is not going to throw this off into like super sweet territory. So let's just add some of those extra chopped up strawberries that I had left over, just to kind of pretty up the top. And I just went out and picked some impatiens that I have growing right outside here, and believe it or not, impatiens are edible. I don't know if you've ever eaten a flower before. I've eaten pansies and roses. I don't know, I'm not that big on eating flowers, despite what they say about us vegans, right? And I think as an ode to the what should be marzipan top, I'm just gonna put a few toasted almonds. I mean, this might be a bit misleading because this might make people think that there's actually nuts in the cake, which there aren't because we did not do the marzipan top. But I think it's a nice little pretty addition as a very natural and rustic looking decoration for this beautiful classic cake. So I'm going to go ahead and try to slice this. I hope that it's set enough to be able to take some pictures of this cake. I really do hope that you guys are going to want to try this recipe. As always, Gretchen'sVeganBakery.com to grab all of the written printable instructions. And definitely comment below and let me know how you are liking this new series, Classic Cakes Veganized. And until next time, happy vegan baking, guys. Bye for now. Well, I thought I was signing off before. I didn't really know how this cutting was gonna go, but just look at this slice. It is absolute perfection. Just look at that custard screaming my name. I love the look of the strawberry syrup layer. Oh, I can't talk about it, you guys, anymore.